Good afternoon. This is Trevor Yu here, and I'm a professor in the Nanyang Business School, specifically teaching in the Human Resource Consulting program. I will be your host and moderator for today's webinar at Winning at Working from Home. First up, let me begin by welcoming our distinguished panelists, starting with Susan Cheong from DBS Bank. Managing Director and Head Talent Acquisition Group HR. We also have Emily Ho from Fullerton Health, Senior Vice President, Human Resources. And last but certainly not least, we have Jovi Seed, Partner, Human Capital Leader from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Our agenda for today will be as follows. I will first start by highlighting some of the key challenges of working from home. This will be followed by a time for individual panelists sharing, after which we will have a moderated time for panel discussions, and we will then round up with a time for Q&A. Allow me to begin by highlighting some of the key challenges that working from home has posed to both organizations and their employees. The first of which is that we should not be viewing working from home as the traditional telecommuting as we know it. The swiftness that businesses have had to adapt and transition most, if not all, of their workforce to these arrangements in a very short period of time has resulted in the fact that many individuals and their jobs, in terms of job expectations, their tasks and responsibilities, have either been left poorly defined or unrealistic. We should also remember the fact that working from home has required people to continue working under a very tenuous overall business climate, one that is characterized by uncertainty and volatility. And at a personal level, many people may be concerned about their job security and relative lack of experience when it comes to excelling at working from home in both the short and the long term. Next, working from home also means that work and family boundaries are blurred than ever before. This means that in conjunction with taking care of their work responsibilities, many people have to juggle these responsibilities with that of the daily chores and needs, taking care of children, for those who have infants, for those who have school-going children who have to undergo home-based learning, and there are also those who have to take care of their elder care responsibilities. Finally, working from home poses tremendous challenges for leaders and their organizations, especially when it comes to managing organizational culture. Just think of the key processes of hiring, onboarding, mentoring, and the managing of work teams. All these processes rely heavily on face-to-face interactions. And what this means is that in their current form, they would not be possible under many of these work-from-home arrangements. So how do companies cope? How do they adapt? And maybe more importantly, how can they excel? For insights to all of these, I'd like to hand over my time now to our distinguished panelists, starting with Susan Cheong from DBS Bank. Over to you, Susan.
Hello, thank you, Prof. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Susan from DBS Bank. I'm going to share with you some of the insights that personally I have, as well as how it feels like working from home in DBS. So let me just start to share a couple of slides, and I'll bring you through some of the observations that we have. Right. Actually, prior to this whole COVID-19 situation, flexible work arrangements were already in place, in fact, for a long time. In DBS, for example, we actually do have flexi time, which means that our core working hours remain between 9:30 to 4:30 on a daily basis, where everyone have to be around. But outside of this timing, you actually can choose whether you want to start earlier or you want to actually start later and end later. So that's flexible for us so that you meet your total number of hours on a typical work week basis. At the same time, it's again not new. Working from home is actually available even prior to COVID situation. right? Whereby we can work flexibly, and that helps the staff. Actually, we can work seamlessly from home when necessary. For example, on a given day or a half day where you actually have personal matters, and for working parents especially, sometimes your children might fall sick and it's difficult for you to actually apply for leave, but you can opt to actually work from home. So that's already in place. Part-time hours, I will not mention too much about here, is less relevant in what we are going to discuss today, but that's an option as well, for colleagues that we have who needs to make arrangements, and they can revert back to normal working hours should they settle all their issues. Now, why was working from home not the norm? We asked ourselves this question, and we actually asked our own colleagues, why was it not the norm when it was already an option? First and foremost, one, sometimes the job nature does not allow for it. In banks, for example, where you actually have a large number of colleagues in the front line, people in the front line servicing the customers, and you actually have, people who needs to deal with physical documents, or sometimes they require real-time information from some systems or servers. And if you work from home, you can't get full access to all this technology, and that inhibits, and that actually makes working from home not an option. But what about individuals like all of us? There will be deep concerns when you actually speak to different people. One, people are concerned, will my boss like it? People might not like it if I start working from home. You don't know what you're doing at home. Your colleagues or your co-workers might feel that, are you slacking away at home? And actually, when you're not in the office, you can tend to feel out of loop or left out from certain conversations that take place on a day-to-day basis. That's for the individuals. On a larger organizational basis, there will also be concerns. What's the productivity of the workforce in general when people start to work from home? What's the engagement going to be like for people when they work from home? What about the controls and security? And for those of us who are in industries where you're handling sensitive information, it's not easy. You don't know who's looking behind your computer, your laptops, accessing the information when you speak to the phone, who's around you. Those are very practical concerns that inevitably organizations would have. Now, come COVID this year or last year, what happened? Suddenly, we realized that working from home or telecommuting became the default option. In fact, for most of us on this call, we are all working from home during the circuit breaker period. And suddenly, even in an environment like a bank, we found that remote systems were possible. Systems were up and running. Even those which we thought were not possible, people could work from home. One example I can actually share with you. We almost thought it's not possible for a call center to be actually functioning from home. But today we can. Our colleagues who are the call center agents, some of them do function from homes and quite effectively, of course, with the relevant controls in place. So it's possible. We started to send reminders out, to all our colleagues working from home. Be careful about securing your location, securing your devices, your network. So you can read a lot of literature on the internet. What about the tips? What are some of the tips you can actually work successfully from home? And these are all readily available in the last few months. And long and short of it is majority of us can function actually quite effectively working from home. In fact, when we measure the productivity levels across different teams within the bank, productivity levels were actually holding up on a tactical basis. And what I mean by tactical basis is that what needs to be done got done. The productivity levels we measured between April and March, for example, there was actually no drop. Everybody was coping well. The numbers were all holding up. There were no backlogs. But what about the deeper part about the engagement, the connectivity, the cohesion? That remains something that is a question mark. And deep inside, we knew that it might not be always possible to have the same level of collaboration. The engagement is just different, right? When you are not being able to gel together on a face-to-face basis. So that cannot be underestimated. What about the mental wellness and overall wellness of our colleagues? It is not easy to actually be functioning from home, right? The teams needs to be watched out for. If you have young children at home, it's never easy to control them when you are on a call and when you're on the webcam. So those are very practical considerations that we have. Now, the last sharing that I have, what will happen next to working in office versus working from home? It seems that it's all possible, workable for all of us to function effectively from home. But there are actually deeper considerations that people are actually looking at. From an organizational standpoint, you think of what's the structure that you want people to be working from home. Is it everybody working from home? And who's eligible to be working from home? Is it to be cut by job scopes? What's the expectations you set, for the staff when they're working from home? What about the technical capabilities? Is it possible on a long-term basis that people access systems and all that from home? What about the engagement of the workforce? What does culture mean for an organization when you have a large majority of people who do not even meet face-to-face? The performance management comes into place, the process control securities. All these are actually important considerations, right? And you have all the other considerations as well about, what about the individual? What does it mean for you? Are all these even possible? And these are the things that we started to ask each other. And these are very relevant considerations that we have to consider on a longer term basis and more in depth. So with that, I hand on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, this is Emily, and I'm happy to share with you a little more about what Fullerton Health did and what we are. So Fullerton Health Care Group is actually a company that has enterprise health services as well as specialty services spanned across 9 markets in Asia Pacific. We have 6,000 employees supporting about 13 million healthcare transactions throughout the region. Closer to home, we have 700 employees in our clinical services support as well as the headquarter function based in Singapore. So what did we do to prepare for this pandemic and also for working from home? In January, when COVID-19 was beginning to be recognized as a serious illness, we started a multifunctional task force because we were concerned that this was beginning to be very serious. And we started tabletop preparedness exercises where we brought together the clinical and support teams to ensure that they were in sync. And we also started to split our functions into various teams so that we do not come to work to the same place at the same time. Some of the concerns naturally that came about was that we are an essential services company. How do functions that are traditionally face-to-face work from home? And how do we equip our managers to be comfortable and to be confident that productivity is still maintained and still effective for the employees? So we introduced and continued to embed our corporate shared values to the managers, and we continually communicated our focus, and we continually encouraged our managers to reflect and to empathize with their employees. Innovation was definitely a key factor to ensure that we were well equipped. And for some managers who were very used to face-to-face interactions, technology is definitely something that they caught on quickly. We also encourage them to be decisive in their communications because when you have less face-to-face, using technology is as important. For our employees, they were also challenged for how to work from home. And we recognized that very early on that this working from home could be a mental health stressor for our people. Similarly, we recognized the blurring of work and family spaces. We knew our people were possibly distracted, and we gave them tips on how to plan, structure, and organize their day. We also know that they have to somehow maintain a work-life balance, and we thought about how we're going to do this for our people. So when we look at this particular model, this was introduced by David Zinger in 2014. We were thinking about how we're going to engage with our people, be it the leadership, the managers, the customers, or our employees. On a leadership level, we started by getting them involved in a message for all our employees as well as our frontliners. We wanted them to know that our leaders were in it together with them. We continually focus communications on an organization-wide level. There were weekly and bi-weekly messages by our group CEO as well as our HR leadership team. And it was important to tell them what was going on outside and what was going on in the company. I think being in essential services, we are privileged to be able to serve in the community. And in doing so, we also asked our support teams to volunteer in the front line. So besides those that are our clinic managers, our nurses, our doctors, we also encourage the support team to volunteer. So in some of the B2G, business to government projects, we have people supporting at the dormitories as well as at the flotels. On a brand level, we also continually engaged our brand and gave updates on what the corporate as well as the company is doing in the region to support the pandemic efforts. Closer to the employees, what we did to ensure that we were close to them was to think about their well-being and about giving them care programs. So we conducted weekly lunchtime nuggets where there were skill sets that they could learn, for example, like advanced Excel skills, to learn more about nutrition, more about mental well-being. And we're privileged that we have our allied health professionals who could provide this to our people. Similarly, we also encourage our managers to come together to socialize with their teams. We gave them and supported them with platforms on how they can play games online, how they can have fun together with their employees, so as to continue to foster these relationships. On the customer level, we also reached out to our corporate clients as well as to our general public to let them know that as an essential healthcare services company, we also have telemedicine and we also have programs that they could tap on that we could support. So engagement is everywhere, and I would encourage you to consider how you could do this in your organization. I think most of us, when we started work from home, it's a bit like treading on to the unknown. It's a bit like starting the roller coaster ride and not knowing where you're going. And so I would encourage the leaders, the managers, and the HR professionals to think about this concept of recognizing new opportunities. Do you have the right people and skill sets for the new economy? Similarly, when you recognize that you have new roles, new opportunities, are you equipped and ready to recognize and reward them with incentives that make sense? And as we approach perhaps the end of the circuit breaker, we also need to continue to think about how your people are going to return to work, how you're going to anticipate and plan for the way work has changed. And thereby, this is like a cycle. We will not experience this again, but it's definitely a learning journey for all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for sharing, Emily, and Susan as well for setting the scene with DBS practices. Increasingly, I'm getting used to speaking to a screen and kind of not knowing where the participants are, not able to read kind of like the interest level in a virtual room. I guess pretty much based on this timing, people probably having lunch and listening in at the same time. So I'll just kind of make this next few parts of the slide relatively brief, given that I think I'm hearing from Susan and Emily a lot of common themes, and I won't repeat those, and just kind of share a bit of different things that maybe PLC has been doing before we get onto a panel discussion. So if you look at the coming slide, So I guess I don't want to assume that you all know what PwC do. I guess PwC started off way back kind of hundreds of years ago as an accounting firm, but today we do a wide range of things as a professional service firm. And I guess if you want to use one sentence to remember what we do, essentially we build trust in society and help our clients solve important problems. Right, and I guess in kind of present moment, we help the whole society by working from home, right, to minimize congregation and sparing the risk of transmission of the virus. So essentially, because of the nature of our work, where we provide solutions and knowledge and services to clients, our people, really, our human capital is really what we have predominantly, right? Where we think about physical assets, is the office and then the laptop. Other than that, it's all about us in terms of people in people business. So when we adjust to work from home, essentially we are pretty much quite set up for it in a sense, because to Susan's point, when it comes to policies, we talk about flex working arrangement, whether it's in the form of flex time and or flex space. There's already quite a lot of push pre-COVID about the way we work, to be able to do that anywhere, anytime, so long as we meet certain principles of meeting the expectation of our service delivery quality, being able to be contactable, ensuring the safety of our people wherever we work. So that sort of culture is really at play pre-COVID. I guess kind of like when the circuit breaker kicks in, it turns into a bit more like overwhelming. All turn to start at home, as opposed to previously we kind of like adjusting and maximizing the way to work from home or remote working to be efficient. Right. So that is how kind of the journey that we have. And of course, as part of adjusting to doing everything from home, there would still be some nuance, some activity that requires physical signing of documents, such as, because we do quite a bit of litigation and tort type of work, and with that, some signing is required. So we do need to figure out a way to navigate some of those activities. Right. So other than work, obviously, people being our business, the whole networking, contact, relationship is one big aspect of it. And not being able to do that in person, there's always feeling of something missing. So with that, I think what then we have learned to do a lot more is also being very deliberate about setting things up with colleagues, setting things up with teams, with our clients, and all that, so that we make sure that we spend quality time with each other, despite being a virtual platform. So that is pretty much kind of the journey that we have in short. So if I can take you to the next page or slide. Right, so essentially, I mentioned a couple of that earlier, and I think alluding to the earlier speakers, technology is obviously one big part of it. Right? It's hard to do what we're doing now from home without enabling technology that supports it. Right? Fortunate in some way for us, other than having rolled out quite a number of the IT infrastructure several years ago, we also went through a program to do digital upskilling for our workforce of 3,005 people. So that digital upskilling has involved numerous aspects of navigating certain tools that can enable people working productively from kind of anywhere. So that has been helpful from a technology standpoint. And policy-wise, I mentioned about that flex space, flex time, and then we all get that eventually boils down to mindset and behavior in terms of how people can be able to work together while physically apart, right? So with that, in fact, we also kind of learning from the last month or so, where most people, almost all, are working from home, to continue to want to crowdsource for ideas into how to do things better, right? We all started kind of saying that, are there any pain points that our people have, and trying to address those pain points by coming up with solutions. So that is a process that we have put in place to kind of constantly learn and be able to adapt to the situation. Okay, so maybe I'll just quickly get on to the next slide as well. right? So over here, kind of like a bit more details, but I won't get down too much into the boring stuff, because the things that we do from home in delivering services that we can, there are still quite a bit of things in the past that requires a physical presence, right? So like when we hire people, in fact we hire quite a number of graduates, and we hire interns, and of course we also do onboard experience hires, and that happens throughout the year. So when that happens, without the office being accessible, we are now for the past 6 weeks or so in onboarding our hires kind of virtually, right? So we get the IT assets, the laptops and other stuff being sent to them directly, and then we do the whole virtual e-learning in terms of integrating them into our business, and kind of the buddy system to connect and all that virtually. So that change is something that we found that we didn't realize that it's possible. Of course, with the lack of human touch, something still seems missing. But given the situation, that's what we have managed to support and enable. When it comes to training, that's also something that we do throughout the whole year at different parts of our kind of the annual life cycle of the employee, to learn some of the technical skills as well as some of the business skills, right? So for those programs, we have also kind of turned that into a virtual form predominantly. We have always looked at digitizing the training material, right? Trying to aim towards that 80-20 kind of format, like 80% learn wherever you are, in whatever bite size, and then be able to tailor to the training needs of each individual. For now, it's 100% because we don't have classroom to attend, and then everything is done virtually. So in terms of the e-learn, coaching, development, all that is now during this period of time done virtually. Okay, so so that is pretty much some of the key points here. I would pick up a bit on the point on the mental health. I think that point has been raised earlier, which I think is a very important point, given that a lot of our mindset today, whilst we are in a circuit breaker mode, is all about how do we continue working, right? How do we then make this much better and all that, which is rightly so from an employer standpoint. But what I want to highlight is that we can't forget that there would be certain people within our workforce who will find it very challenging to grapple with this new environment. Largely because of it's not really like what students say, it's not really flex anymore. It's really stuck at a place right then where before the school holiday, you have home-based learning happening for parents, and then coping with several things and demand in a space, and not everybody has the benefit of having their own kind of room and use it as an office space during the day. So that kind of challenge we want to be very about. So constantly we call out using different platforms and channels to call out whoever need help, whether the vulnerable groups or people who need to address family members and or people whom they are living with who are vulnerable. We want to be extremely sensitive about that and to make assumptions. Okay, and maybe then I'll just get on to the next next point. This is a very quick sharing. Because now that we are almost coming near to the end of the circuit breaker, in fact, later as we speak, it's all about kind of planning for and then making it work in terms of returning to new normal, right? When the office space open gradually over the month of June, fingers crossed, touching with that this all happen next few months in a way that the government anticipates. Then we need to already plan for then what is the new normal for us, right? We did a survey very recently, just a week or so ago. Our workforce, more than 1,000 of them, near to 1,500, I understand the statistics to be that, have said back that they like work from home, right? 85% of them say so, and then they felt that they have become somewhat more productive, possibly because maybe they have converted some of those commuting time into work, and then the blurring of line between personal and work. I don't know, maybe that has freed up some time for work. I myself don't, find that has been a struggle, but good that 86% of them have felt that they become productive, and also quite a large number of them are hoping that after this whole COVID, that the whole flex arrangement become something that will stick and stay for a long time, a sustainable model. Okay, so the survey that we had, if we look at just the next 2 pages very quickly, because kind of like too wordy, because I think quite importantly later on as we get into the panel will be more to bring some of the conversation alive, and hopefully through some of the questions that you all raise, we can address maybe what's top of your mind. Here I relate back to the mentioning of how to make this whole thing sustainable, right? So there are 3 parts of that, and then skill set is clearly where then how do we people, the workforce, learn to be able to operate in a manner that we may not have all the person next to you, right? So technology aside is the skills to be able to do that. Then that changed the way we work, and therefore very quickly also created that whole thinking of then what would our new target operating model look like, right? So all along we have been looking at 5-year plans, and then in the 5-year plan we calibrate a few of those changes, whether in terms of how we address the market as well as how we operate, right? So that this in the current state that has accelerated the whole conversation, right? And then not forgetting, other than all the work that we talk about, the whole engagement piece, which is then how do we relate to each other, right? The whole social aspect, the connection, right? That the whole reimagining how we keep in touch, right? By way of doing some virtual coffee, virtual lunch together, virtual conversation, and all the coaching discussion is something that's critical, because without that to balance out, the whole aspect of work, it will be difficult to be sustainable. Okay, the final page on the next slide would be, I put in quite a few points here because there are quite a few tips that along the way our team has surfaced to say that how people can stay connected more and become more productive, and then and learn from that. So I thought it might be useful to populate them here. I think these slides should be available to share after this. So I won't get into much of this, but if you look at some of the key bold statements, setting clear expectation, being very intentional about how we engage people, not forgetting, very importantly, how to make the whole inclusivity work with everyone, because not everyone is at the same place and has the same ability to cope, right? So that's important. The communication strategy, the way to communicate, how do we set in the frequency of meeting each other, the trust element of coming together, being focused on goals, so on and so forth, right? So it's all on the slide. And I guess with this one, I believe many, in fact, all of us who are on this call already have experience with from home, right? We all are just using different mode and having different culture that make this work, right? So later, very happy to share more together with the panel. Just move on to let the panel come on board.
So thank you very much to our 3 panelists for a very insightful sharing. I'd just like to emphasize that this whole session is being recorded, and our communications team will be happy to share the recording with all attendees and all people who have signed up after this session. Just stay tuned for communications from NBS. So I'd like to start our discussion session by incorporating some of the many wonderful questions that we've been receiving so far already. The first question deals with well-being. How important is it as a role of a HR or human capital leader during this time to help their company ensure that employees' well-being is being taken care of by the employer? Can you offer some thoughts about this? How about we start with you, Susan?
Okay, I think for us, right, in DBS, I think it's important for a HR person to actually be the voice of the employees. many a times during this kind of situation, it's natural at a corporate level to be concerned about productivity, to be concerned about security when people are working from home. And I'm glad that this piece on the employee well-being is not overlooked. And we have to be constantly be the voice to ensure that at the whether it's a senior management level or even at the middle level of management, people are very conscious about managing the well-being to the extent that small little things like you don't have the same kind of expectations just because you're comfortable working from home, that your colleagues have that same environment as you, just to cite an example. And I think one very frequent comment we hear is that when I'm working from home, people expect me to be on call all the time because I'm at home. So you don't even have designated breaks and you're expected to react instantaneously. And I think sometimes people forget about such things very easily. So for us, from a HR perspective, is that constant advocacy to remind people not to forget. So I think that's the role of HR when it comes to employee well-being. Of course, other ancillary things will be very important. Like I think Emily mentioned, the engagement with staff. We run programs like mental wellness. We give them a mind-free app so that people can breathe and you don't forget about your own mental wellness and you take care of yourself. And I think one last point I want to make is we actually remind our colleagues, do take leave even though you can't travel, you can't go anywhere, because I think people sometimes forget that although you're at home, you need to take breaks. And sometimes it helps that you're shut off from the system. Yeah.
How about you, Emily? Any practical
Yes.
suggestions? Yes.
Yes, I think I share the same sentiments as what Susan mentioned about HR being the advocate for our employees. We want to remind our managers to empathize with their employees, because sometimes, actually, in fact, the managers are the ones who would know their team best. This is the best time for them to get to know their employees' families. You actually have a reason to say, hey, am I disrupting your lunchtime, and am I disrupting the start of your children's home-based learning? Is actually a good opener, because you have reason to ask about their families, you have reason to think about, to be empathetic and try not to disrupt their family routines, because you never know, be it the father, the mother, or the son or the daughter, they are in the middle of something at home, and there they are trying to manage the work-life balance, right? The work on one side, the family on the other side, and that struggle is so real, and the managers must always remember that. So I think this is a good time for managers to connect with their people, and that's very important.
If I could chime in, at an individual level, we want to also encourage employees to be proactive when it comes to taking care of their own well-being. Perhaps, Jovi, what are some of the useful or effective advice that you can share from some of your experiences with your company, or at least personally?
Sure, happy to share. I think for a starter, there needs to be a recognition that this kind of situation is really unprecedented, right? It's a combination of a pandemic that leads to a widespread financial distress for the economy, and then where people are not only just kind of stressed about, okay, what will happen to my work, and at the same time, how do I work? And then with a lot of constraints, right? And part of this constraint is the inability also to relate with people. Like the whole safe distancing actually makes people, unable to get close to each other and look after each other well-being in a way that we used to do before. So that whole setting has made it really difficult. And I think a lot of learning that we need to pick up along the way, and this kind of learning actually evolved. What we started off like say 2 months ago, and we thought that that's a good idea. We went through it and realized that, oh, maybe we should actually change the way we do that and learn again. So this whole be fast to recognize that something don't work and then apply something new and then try again and keep trying again is what I think something that we need to start to become more comfortable with and embrace, right? So that's one. And I think just also to relate a bit on the personal, picking up Emily's and Susan's point, right? This whole remote working and or working from home has led to the blurring of lines between personal and work, right? And one thing that triggered it is very inevitably our scheduling, right? So the schedules in the calendar, at least in my organization, is open for people to look at availability and then make that booking. So the booking of the meetings will just keep coming in from all directions, right? Used to have somebody who kind of manage the office space and say, okay, if you think of an appointment, you have half an hour now, you have 15 minutes later, you need another person, and you may be external, internal. Now, if you, after this meeting, the next moment, okay, let's get into the next one, right? 15 meetings to 20 meetings for some people in a day is happening. So it's quite stressful. So I think then picking up, therefore, on Susan's point is that then we need to be very conscious that don't be led into this non-stop, chase of meetings after meetings, and find a break for ourselves. Because if we cannot take care of ourselves, it's hard to take care of others. Right? So my one big, I guess, advice, if I can, although I'm myself is guilty of it, is to make sure that we practice in a way that we protect enough time for for us to not be doing this non-stop. And when we do that, our team members, our staff, and all that will therefore be cascading down, because it all starts from the top down, right? So all the managers operate this way, all the staff will be all reacting to back-to-back meetings non-stop.
I'm glad that you actually started talking about some of these unintended effects of technology on the way that we work. We have been receiving quite a number of questions on, what kinds of technologies would be particularly useful, at least from a managing employees standpoint. I'm starting to see more and more companies tout technology as like one of the key solutions, either being AI-based technologies, companies that are offering virtual tools. That we also had a question on employee monitoring software. So what are some of these technologies that you feel has the potential to really make an impact when it comes to engaging employees and taking care of their well-being during this time? Any thoughts?
Maybe
Emily,
yes. I can just pick on a few points, then maybe Emily, you can then add to that. In terms of direction of play that can facilitate this whole environment, one of which is platform like this, right? So where we can feel as if we are actually together, right? We can see each other, and then we can talk to each other. So I think platforms that can visually allow us to connect, that is helpful from an engagement standpoint. The other part, direction of play, is we constantly think about the ability to work from anywhere, right? So meaning work on the move, these things can be accessible easily on mobile devices, and things can get pulled out from system in a way that you can consume directly. So it's self-help rather than look for many other people to find the things you want. So the system and or the technology or process that can channel data points to allow users individually to pull it out for self-help, that will be extremely useful, right? And then finally, one more point would be, because if we cannot work side by side on a common document, then if the technology allow us to look at the document as if we are together, then that helps, right? For example, we are onto the Google Sheets, the Google documents and all that. That is one example of, say, when you look at one piece of document, we can put the screen here and look at you, and we look at the screen in terms of the document. You actually can make amendments, changes, ask questions real time as if you're next to each other. So I think some of these things, if we put it all together, it's kind of like help navigate out of the need for physical presence.
Emily?
Yes, I think for me, I think of it slightly differently for technology in terms of the well-being of the people. How do we continue to engage them on a social level? Because we are missing our friends, we are missing, interactions with our colleagues. We're missing the in-between tea breaks, the time that we get to chit-chat, right? And so I think we are fortunate that many of us in Singapore are technology enabled, right? All of us have a mobile phone, all of us have technology in our hands. And what is out there for us, to me, there are two types, the static and the live type of technology. To me, static can still be mobilized, means you can get people to come together, take photos, and put it into a collage, right? And send it as a message. That is static because you have to do some homework before it comes up front. The other type is the live environment. For example, your gaming platforms. I know it's a bit weird to talk about gaming, but it does satisfy the social element, right? Because you miss interactions, you miss your sporting activities, your gym, and so on. So these platforms, to me, are just as important to ensure that our employees' well-being are taken care of.
Any thoughts, Susan?
Yeah, I think the virtual tools are the ones that keep us going, and we may think that the virtual tools are the ones that actually get productivity going as well. But personally, I actually do find a lot of tools very helpful in maintaining the engagement as well. I think people feel a little bit stressed out to be expected to be on emails all the time. So we do actually use Microsoft Teams, which actually functions like a WhatsApp where you can have group chats, and it's actually efficient because everybody, you can chat real time and all that. You don't feel as pressurized somehow, I don't know why, as compared to emails. So that where, in a whole entire group chat, things get going very quickly. That's one thing that I personally like. And I agree with Emily that sometimes it's about not just about the tools. It's really how you bother to engage people. You can use any tools out there. I think there's all the tools we explored, things like, I can't remember, party time or party house, I don't know what is it called, but we realize there's a constraint on the number of people who can take part, right? But anyways, there are many things out there. It's the question of whether, what is your intent? How do you want to bring people together? If your intent is really about bringing people together, you can play online games together. It works. We have this happiness challenge on a simple mindfulness app. You just see how many people take part and whether you track your own happiness index, things like that. And it's not mandatory. You can participate if you want. If you don't wish to, it's not compulsory. So I think it makes people feel that, hey, there's something else outside of the normal work tools that I want to play with. So those are some of the things that I personally like.
I think a lot of our audience members are also curious and maybe even a little bit concerned about what the world of work will look like once the circuit breaker ends on June the 1st. So if I can borrow a quote from our Minister for Trade and Industry, right, Chan Chun Sing. He says that working from home will continue to be the norm for the majority even after the circuit breaker ends. So what exactly, I mean, if you were to put your futurist hats on, what exactly can employers, their employees, co-workers expect when it comes to the new world of work after the circuit breaker ends? What are some of your predictions? Maybe Jovi, we start with you.
Okay, sure. I would say if I need to list like the top thing that I will be looking out for in this new world, it will be the human. Right. So I think to the point that Susan and Emily made, right, the tools and technologies, they are something that we use. And given that in the new norm, we will be increasingly digitized and increasingly using platforms like that, the intent and the people behind it is absolutely important. Right. So if I may just share something that happened yesterday, which touches, the heart, is a colleague sent by surprise a tea bag, a box of tea bag, and I received it by surprise, and then I got a calendar invite for next week to do a session to drink tea together, right? So I'm very happy that things like that is happening in the organization, and I'm here that there are people who are doing that a lot amongst the colleagues and friends, and I guess the humanity skill is something that we even more heightened in this new age. People who are able to rise above AI, rise above all the automation. We use that, of course, for productive reasons. So that, but then not forgetting that it's how we use it and the skills to use it will then therefore surface to the top. That will be one of the primary.
Yes, I'm sorry I cut someone off earlier. Was it Emily or
Oh,
Susan?
it's okay. Let me chime in, Susan, here. So I think it's from a very practical consideration when we say that life is not going to revert back to normal on the first day that circuit breaker ends. It is just practical considerations whereby we can't imagine everybody rushing to go back, to work. It's not going to function in the same way, and that's I think expected. So for example, right now we are actually in the bank really planning for going back to work after circuit breaker. And I think first and foremost on our consideration is actually about the safety. So for example, when you go back and function in the office, even if you can go back, right? The question is you have to keep social distancing in place. You have to ensure that people do basic hygiene considerations like wear your mask all the time. You do not actually congregate. We even within the bank, we not only have split sites, but we have actually non-cross floor commingling, which means you can't commingle across your floors for any meetings or whatsoever, right? But in any case, because of the 1 to 2 meters of social safety distancing, right, you can't even have a meeting in a room full of people. That's not going to be the normal anymore. So with that considerations in mind, practically, if you want to ensure that people are actually 1 or 2 meters apart, our capacity in terms of seats, for example, will technically go down by half. So which means if you take that as a simple calculation, it's only logical to say that then there must be a large proportion, whether is it 40, 50%, still continuing to work from home. And then who would that be? They will be the people who really need to go back because they need to, whether it's servicing the customers or handling some of the documents or people who need the systems, things like that. So that's a very deliberate intent of planning who goes back to work. It's not as simple as just saying that, do you want to work from home or do you want to go back to the office? Then the second order questions would really be, if you have a choice, then within a team, for example, who would that be? Do you give people preferences? Do you not? And then do you then say that, is it fair, is it not fair? That's where the structure all have to come into play about who goes back, who doesn't. We haven't come to the stage later on in months, say for example, a year-end cycle. When it comes to performance appraisal, I think it's going to be very practical consideration for any staff of any organizations to then say, did you actually feel that you get penalized just because you were not functioning in the office? So things like that, there's a short-term and long-term considerations that's got to be made.
Yeah, that's very funny. So 6 weeks ago, we were doing this thing about pain points working from home so that we figure out how to solve it, right? Very soon later, it will be pain points working from office. Because all these rules that we need to govern in order to meet, all the safety of everyone is going to make it so challenging.
Yeah. Emily?
Yes, following up on both Jovi and Susan's points, I totally agree that things are going to be so different that the managers have to rethink how they assess the employees, how they're going to keep up with, traditional ways of tracking your employees' performance, how you even going to have coaching conversations when you are on, using a technology platform rather than face-to-face. I mean, there are managers who feel that face-to-face is the primary way of engaging with employees, and it becomes even more difficult when you're trying to manage it for performance management. So besides this, I think besides that, for the businesses, we have to rethink about space. And I mean, for essential services, it's just as important. Telemedicine is a new thing. Are customers ready for it? Are customers still rethinking that? I think many of our businesses are rethinking this in terms of their what targets they're going to set, what are they going to reevaluate. So yeah.
So we have a little bit of time for us to do a roundup now. Perhaps I could encourage you to leave our audiences with one final piece of advice, especially when it comes to this thought that this whole situation with the COVID has given all businesses an opportunity to reevaluate and innovate how they are going to manage their employees to the future. So some of the interesting ideas that I've come across so far is things like talent sharing across different businesses and things like that. For our key audience of human resource leaders and human capital leaders, what are some of the, what is the last key word of advice that you will leave to them about the impact of working from home and how they can learn from this whole experience here? Maybe Jovi?
Sure, happy to start. It may not be kind of just about COVID, but I think a lot of learning which heighten, the emphasis on care. I want to kind of emphasize that again. The care component from a human capital standpoint, we pay that out a lot, of course, the need for personal, the mental well-being and the personal well-being, by making sure that we care for each other, right? And an extension of that is then, of course, also not forgetting the whole society at large, where how do we help and care for others, right? And to that extent, one challenge which more often than not could be beyond businesses or companies is where this whole change that's happening so quickly, inevitably there may be a certain segment and a group of people who couldn't catch up, right? We can say all we want about reskill, retrain, upskill, put in all the funding you need to do that. But when that people who cannot deal with the use of all this technology and the new way of working to catch up or to cope, what happens? I think, of course, this needs to be a society kind of solutioning or government agenda. And it's sometimes beyond one nation. It's probably what the world needs to come around to figure out how to come, to think through this more like a humanity journey. I think until such time that kind of big picture is sorted out from a corporate standpoint, of course we look after our employees, but we will always struggle with then how does that connect with the society at large.
Okay. Emily?
For me, a key word to reflect about would be agility. So, for HR professionals, how do we prepare our employees to be agile, to be ready to have an open mindset for the challenges ahead? It's something that is not easy to train, but it's something that we could continue to embed in our culture. So, yeah, that would be a keyword for me.
Okay. And last but not least, Susan.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Emily in terms of agility. As we speak, things are changing actually by the minute, and all of us are assessing the situation as we move along. But I think what's important from a HR personnel standpoint is that we need to balance. You have to balance your organizational needs and constraints in the midst of assessing what's happening. At the same time, you need to balance that with you are the voice of conscience, you are the advocate for the employees, and how does that come together so that you do not take care of just one aspect in terms of your considerations, but there are many stakeholders in the entire equation, be it the organization or the employees actually, or even the society at large.
Thank you very much. And with that, I think that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you very much to the three of you for spending your time with us. And thank you every one of our audience also for tuning in. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.